there's two scenarios where Unum tries to get information from the doctor, right? Number one is they'll send the attending physician statement to the claimant and say, we need your doctor to fill this out. And in those scenarios, we always recommend that a claimant takes that form, goes to their doctor while sitting with their doctor, asks the doctor to complete it, get it back from the doctor, and then you, claimant, send it to the carrier. This way you make sure that there's no inconsistencies in what the doctor puts into the claim form. The other scenario that we often see that Unum is notorious for that results in a lot of denials is they randomly reach out to the doctor's office without the claimant patient even knowing. Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Dell Disability Lawyers, here with attorney Stephen Jessup and Alex Palamara. And guys, we're going to talk today about a Unum disability appeal victory. Unum's been quite stingy lately, or aggressive, I should say, on their disability denials, as we all know. But this was a recent victory, Alex, that you had on your case. So we always get together, talk about our recent cases so that people can learn from them, and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of what Unum did in this denial and how we were able to help the client. So give us a little bit of background of your case.
So the cool thing about this case is that we can learn from this, and potential clients can learn from this. Anyone watching this video can learn from this case. And to give a little bit of background into this case, our client was a longtime employee. He was a director of golf course maintenance. He worked for a private golf club, and the golf club actually had 3 golf courses, 3 18-hole golf courses, so 54 holes, all Nicholas design, a very nice exclusive private golf course in Florida. He was the head, he worked there since 2006, was there for almost, I guess, 16 years, if I had to do the math quickly in my head. Director of golf course maintenance, in charge of all the golf courses there. You think that job is pretty easy? It's not. It's a lot of work. It's not just putting fertilizer on the floor and calling it a day. It's beyond that. Obviously you have to keep the upkeep of the golf course, but it's also budgeting, staffing. A lot more than just putting fertilizer on the floor. But the guy worked there for a number of years, but unfortunately in May of 2023, he had a stroke, and he left work for a number of months, but the residual impact of his stroke was detrimental to his health, detrimental to his ability to work. Suffered from left-sided weakness, cloudy visual issues, voice issues, fatigue issues, just the normal things that happen after somebody has a stroke. Fortunately for him, his employer did have a policy with Unum, and at first Unum did pay benefits. He was approved on his own, and benefits were paid for about a year or so. But what he did wrong was, Unum reached out to his treating providers, and the treating providers got forms to fill out, and what happened? The forms were never filled out. So Unum took a hard look at the case, and forms were never completed. And Unum got other updated medical records and said, oh, we saw in the medical records that that you went to Colorado, and we saw in the medical records that you signed up for some sort of running marathon activity. And this goes beyond what you say you're unable to do, and we're denying your case here. So what did? They went ahead and denied the case. Lo and behold, he found us, and I talked to him and I said, this doesn't sound right. This is not adding up. And the way you're talking to me right now, it doesn't sound like you can do your job on a full-time basis. What's going on here? And we signed up the case, and lo and behold, ultimately we won the case.
All right, so I want to back up a little bit because you mentioned claim forms and that his doctor didn't fill those out. And Steve, when disability insurance carriers ask for claim forms, it's probably one of the most important moments in any claim. Why do you find that to be such an important time, and how important is it to fill that claim form out correctly?
I mean, with the claim form, at that point, what they are doing is an active review. Now, sometimes, depending on the length of claim, you can't really tell how in-depth that review may be, but like what happened in Alex's situation, when they don't get those back, their response is generally just to pull medical records and have their doctors review it without the treating physician's real input in the way of the form. So it's vital that it's filled out completely by the doctor, but also that it's maintaining a level of supportiveness for the disability. In a situation, I spoke with the potential just this week, suffered from a stroke. She did her own appeals, were denied. So she's at a litigation standpoint, but when I spoke to her on the phone, she still had a bunch of speech issues. Like she was in vocal rehab and all that type of stuff. But kind of the same thing that you see here is that it was showing improvement in her records. These certain markers were hit, so the further you got away, you must be doing better. And one other thing too, in the medical records, if it's also stating that, all these additional activities going on, that can be problematic. I think that's a caution as to what you exactly share with your doctor about what's going on in your personal life, so if it shows up in the records there. But, the doctor not completing a form can be the easiest way to allow an insurance company to render a decision. And then, Unum is also real big on then, hey, we came with this opinion, we sent it to your doctor for a review. Well, if they didn't hear back on the form, they're probably not going to hear back on that review. So since we didn't hear back, we're going to go with what our doctors have to say.
Right. So if the forms aren't completed, they're going to do a deeper investigation into your claim. I mean, they might do a deeper investigation anyways, but when they get those medical records, and you always have to be reviewing those medical records, because what they're going to see in the medical records, if you're not reviewing them on a regular basis, they can take things out of context. And what they saw in those medical records, oh, you signed up for some sort of, long distance run. And no, he didn't. He kind of did, but it was more for motivation. He wasn't doing a marathon. He actually used to do marathons in the past, but he signed up for some sort of online thing where it was going to be like running a certain amount of miles over the course of the year. He knew he was not going to be able to do it, but he wanted to sign up so he can motivate himself to do it. Yes, he went to Colorado. His dad was dying. Did he do a hike in Colorado? No, but he did go to Colorado. He talked about going to Colorado to see his dying dad. He said, maybe I'll do a hike, but it was in his medical records. So it was taken out of context, but what the insurance company does, they run with it, right? So when those forms are not completed, so there's no support there, and they can take out of context what's in his medical records, so it's grounds for denial.
I want to interrupt you there. There's a lot of people who watch our videos regularly, and in this particular case, if you recall, was that there's two scenarios where Unum tries to get information from the doctor, right? Number one is they'll send the attending physician statement to the claimant and say, we need your doctor to fill this out. And in those scenarios, we always recommend that a claimant takes that form, goes to their doctor while sitting with their doctor, asks the doctor to complete it, get it back from the doctor, and then you, claimant, send it to the carrier. This way you make sure that there's no inconsistencies in what the doctor puts into the claim form. The other scenario that we often see that Unum is notorious for that results in a lot of denials is they randomly reach out to the doctor's office without the claimant, patient even knowing, send some random letter saying, do you agree or disagree with these restrictions or limitations, saying nothing about the fact that it may be an own occupation definition of disability, not explaining that it's about their ability to work, can they work or not that it about their activities of daily living, like can they walk, talk, sleep, eat, dress themselves, those kinds of random things. So in this particular claim, did they send the form to the claimant, or did they try to backdoor the claimant and go straight to the doctor?
I don't recall off the top of my head. It was obviously before I was involved, so I don't recall off the top of my head, but I can tell you what we did to justify, or to remedy the situation. Okay. So the client signed up with us. The first thing we did was get a copy of the claim file, go through the entire claim file, figure out what went wrong. We figured out what went wrong. We got the medical records, and I saw, that your medical records are just they're able to take it out of context. Everything that was in your medical records, we have to fix this. So what we did was we sent our client to a neuropsychological evaluation. We sent him to a functional capacity evaluation, and we found the vocational study that Unum did on the case, and they found that his job was a light duty job, which it was not. It's a medium level occupation, which we proved to them. And we proved to them with the neuropsychological evaluation that he had significant cognitive defects, and we proved to them with the functional capacity evaluation that he didn't have the ability to even do light duty work. So and I think I forgot to mention initially is that his policy is a regular occupation policy. So his employer has a great policy for him, because normally in these ERISA group policies, as people will see when they're reviewing our website, is that most of these group policies have the change in definition of disability after 2 years or so. Typically, for the first 2 years, you have to be disabled from your own occupation. Then it becomes a little bit more difficult to qualify when it changes to any gainful occupation or any occupation. But this policy does not have that. So we proved, with our appeal, we proved to them that he does not have the ability to do his own occupation. So we put all this together with an appeal, and we made it overwhelming for them that we gave them no reason but to basically do what we said, and said we have to overturn this denial. And a couple weeks after we filed this appeal, they overturned that denial.
What's interesting about the cases we have where we're dealing with stroke patients is that people who have strokes can be affected in all different ways, as we know. And in this particular case, you have your physical aspect and you have what we call the cognitive aspect. but you were able to attack this appeal from both angles because this particular claimant obviously was having cognitive difficulties as well as physical difficulties, which is why you went in and tried to prove both aspects of it. So say to Unum, like, look, if you're going to say physically you think you can go back to the job, there's also a significant cognitive component to this. And Steve, I want to ask, in the past, when most of our stroke type cases, we do neuropsychological reviews. How are those types of reviews, a neuropsych review, important for proving cognitive difficulty in a disability claim?
Well, one of the big things you'll see in a denial letter, if there's complaints of cognitive issues, they'll say there's nothing in the records to support it, right? They don't take it at face value. It's deemed subjective as a complaint. So the neuropsychological testing is there to verify the objectivity of those subjective complaints of memory issues, not being able to think as fast, just your functioning of that nature. So it's really, kind of in a lot of ways the equivalent of being able to do an MRI of someone's back to find out if there's a disc herniation. It gives a very objective. Now, insurance companies can certainly, and we've all had it where we've done those, and then they've had their doctors review it and disagree with the findings or say this testing wasn't done or question the veracity of it. So that can be happen, but it is the best objective evidence you can provide of it, because it's very difficult to quote unquote fake that test. You'd have to be a genius to be able to get around all the built-in validity measures. So it is the strongest type of information you can do in a cognitive testing situation, especially if the condition is a neurological problem.
And the issue where I would say Unum traps people and uses the saying we see no evidence of cognitive decline as a basis for denial is because in the normal course of treating somebody who had a stroke and they're getting their normal faculties back about them and their cognitive abilities back to them, the doctors don't usually request a neuropsych exam because they know what the deficit is. They don't need a test to tell them, are you having cognitive difficulties? They'll straight up ask the patient, are you having difficulty remembering things? Are you having difficulty balancing your activities? Are you having difficulty managing your times? Are you having difficulty processing certain things? Are you having difficulty while you're reading? They're simple yes or no questions. The patient knows to tell the doctor that. The doctor's not going to send the claimant out for what could be a several $1,000 exam. So we use it, and Unum knows that, but yet they say there's no evidence of your cognitive declines. And that's where we come in and work with the patient and work with the treating neuropsychologist to get the evidence that we are trained to know that Unum's looking for. So it's unfortunate that claimants get stuck in that perspective, and it's unfortunate that Unum demands that kind of evidence in order to obtain support for a claim. So it was great in this case that you were able to go out and get that. It obviously showed that this claimant was having the difficulties. The other thing you talked about was the vocation and the ability, this medium duty, heavy duty. I would argue it's even a heavy duty occupation because a bag of fertilizer
Could be over 100 pounds, right?
could be 50 pounds, 100 pounds. I think anything over
50.
Over 50
It's
is a
heavy.
heavy duty job. Even if his occupation required him one time a week to lift that or some kind of other delivery that came in. So Unum plays games with the occupational description, and they'll just be like, oh, you were a golf course maintenance operator, and then they minimize the duties
They want to dumb it down is what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they overlooked all the mental aspect of his job. I mean, what they really did, they made it a light duty job, and they overlooked all of his, I can't think of the good term for it, but all of his
management responsibilities.
responsibilities. Thank you. When you look at the vocational analysis that they did, they really dumbed it down.
A golf course supervisor, because I happen to know one and represented some, is a very demanding job. I mean, they probably have a staff of a minimum of 30 people.
I mean, 54 holes. Think about this course.
Oh, this was 3 courses.
Right.
So that he probably had 50 people working underneath him.
Well, not
for
to
that
mention
job.
the type of courses, if they're Nicholas developed ones, that's a very high level clientele, so I'm sure there's a lot more responsibility and duty as well.
Well, congratulations to the client on winning this claim, and I know his benefits are reinstated, which is what happens after you get denied, because this claimant was getting paid initially, because usually when someone has a stroke, Unum's going to pay and say, yes, we understand, you definitely had this event, we're not denying that, you definitely have restrictions, but we think you got better, which is what they do with just about every claim, is eventually at some point they go, we think you got better, and they denied him. And you were able to prove to say, no, he still has these limitations. This doesn't mean that they're done with him, unfortunately, and I know that you'll continue to represent him and continue to evaluate his medical records. This issue with the attending physician statement will never happen again, because now every time he gets that form, he's going to submit it to you, which then will go to the doctor and you'll review it. Every claimant statement will be reviewed. Any correspondence from Unum will go through our office. So he's protected now, and all he has to do is continue to treat with the doctor to make sure he gets paid every month. So if you're someone out there with a Unum disability claim, feel free to reach out to Alex, Stephen, myself, any of our disability lawyers. We always provide a free consultation. We can help you anywhere in the country, and we look forward to the opportunity to speak with you.